Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home.
Welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. I'm so happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive. And I'm excited about today's show. We're going to dig into a topic I don't talk a whole lot about, which is anorexia and the need to control and restrict. Okay. So before I go there, I want to say that I'm recording this in the Secret Sauce group. So if you're not in the Secret Sauce group, come along with us. You go to Facebook, you type in the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating. If you've read my book and if you've heard me talk about community, this is a great place to start. To start being around emotional eaters. I have another community called the Heal Your Hunger community for those who are in my program. That's a whole nother level, but we start, you can start with the Secret Sauce group and get with people who get you. And on this show, I talk about topics that don't get talked about a whole lot. And I speak from my personal experience of having been 50 pounds overweight and, really from knowing that it's not about the food and talking about what it really is about. So if that's a conversation you want to hear, please subscribe to the Heal Your Hunger show and tune in. Okay. Tune in for the conversations that we have. They're pretty juicy. They're pretty soul filling. And that's what we need, right? We need to be satisfied on a much deeper level than what sugar and carbs can do for us. And if you're not sure if you're an emotional eater and you want to know more about what that's about, you can take a quiz on my website, healyourhunger.com. You can go there and take a free quiz and you can find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And emotional eating is an important thing to tune into if you struggle with food and weight, because God knows you're probably pretty knowledgeable about what to eat at this point on your journey. If you make it to the Heal Your Hunger universe, you've read a lot of books on nutrition. You've taken a lot of courses. So you're not a dummy. You're not a dummy. You know what to eat and what not to eat, but that makes no difference because you end up eating crappy foods anyway, because you have this terrible compulsion inside that says, I gotta have my chocolate or I gotta have my ice cream, or I need chips, so what's that about? That's what we talk about here at the Heal Your Hunger show. And that's the conversation that hopefully you're ready for. So I'm excited about today's topic. I'm shooting from the hip here. It's usually how I roll. So thanks for being with me and going on this little journey about emotional eating and what happens when we dip into anorexia. Thanks so much. Please share this show with those who you think could really be fortified by it. I love you so much. On with the show. Welcome to my friends who have just joined the Secret Sauce group. So happy you're here. I have a topic today that you might not have expected me to talk about, but boy, is it important. So, I cover so many different topics. If you've listened to my podcast before, if you've been on one of my master classes or events, there's a lot to cover, right? And we cover a lot. My book, obviously, I can only put so much in my book. So that's why I fill it out here in the Secret Sauce group and in my programs and anywhere I can. So welcome. If you are new to the Secret Sauce group, or you're just tuning back in, please say hello in the comments. I'd love to say hello to you and know who you are and what's up. So today I want to talk about something that's very important and serious on the one hand. But if you know me, you know that it's all, everything is, what is it? Marie Forleo, if you know her, she has a book called Everything is Figure Outable. So it's figure outable. And when it comes to eating behaviors and disordered eating, there's many aspects of that. I find that disordered eating is a great umbrella term. I think an even better term is emotional eating. And I'll explain in a second why, but I want to talk about if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, I want to talk about when you're an emotional eater and you start to lose weight, and then you start to get a little anorexic, or you start to get into that head of being very controlling and restrictive and afraid of gaining weight to the point where you might go the opposite direction and become underweight. Important topic. I've done it. Okay. I've done it, and I'm going to be speaking from my personal experience, which I usually do. So yeah, this is such an important topic because, you know, we don't want to heal from one thing and then swap it out with another thing, right? I call that changing deck chairs on the Titanic. You're still going down, right? Like, you don't want to become overcome one addiction and pick up another addiction. And I've done that. And you probably have too. You know, I used to, when I was in diet mode, when I was much younger, I used to smoke when I was on a diet. I used to light up. This is in my teens. I used to light up, and I wasn't really a smoker except when I was trying to lose weight. And then I'd pick up smoking as another oral fixation, because I have been an orally fixated person and probably still am a bit, but I don't act out with food or cigarettes, thank God. Or alcohol. I mean, there's so many things, right? So, I still like my stevia flavored soda, but point is, you know, you don't want to be addicted. You don't want to be addicted for the rest of your life. You don't want to be enslaved to anything. I don't, at least, and probably you don't either, but that's what we do. And that's often our solution for emotional eating, is to just distract ourselves with another addiction. So it's really important to watch this and make sure that we're not doing that, because if so, we're still enslaved, and we don't want to live that way. We don't want to live obsessed or hooked on anything. At least, you know, that's not true freedom. Okay. So there's a better way. If you have switched addictions, like maybe you're really into a common thing is when you start to lose weight, or you do so by fitness, you can be addicted to fitness, right? You can get super obsessed with being in the gym for 4 hours, or you can be obsessed with running marathons or doing triathlons. If you get hooked into losing weight via fitness, you know, those of you who have joined my program, my 90-day program, and so on, you know, there's a better way. There's a way by which you can have the compulsion to overeat removed. You don't have to control it with exercise. You don't have to control your eating, control your weight with exercise. Now, I love to exercise. Well, I don't love to exercise. I do exercise. I'm not one of those triathletes, trust me. But I like to feel my body strong. I like to condition my body, have my core be strong so it supports me. And that kind of thing. And so I walk and I do a bar class. Okay. But I don't love fitness. I curse under my breath when I'm in my bar class. But still I feel great afterwards. Okay. But the point is, I'm not going to bar class to control my weight. It's more of a self-love thing. I'm loving on my body because I want to have a strong body, and I want my body to support me through the years into a long, long way ahead from now. And the only way I can do that is by treating it right, by not overeating, exercising regularly, and drinking lots of water and getting good sleep and so on. Sex. Yeah, that's in there too. So I exercise for that reason, but I don't exercise to control my weight, because I have a solution for emotional eating. I'm not compelled to eat. I'm not compelled to overeat. You know, I treat my body with love and respect, food wise and nutrition wise. And that's what I want for you. Okay. That's what I want for you. If you don't have that right now, if you are exercising, you know, in extreme ways to try to control food binges, there's a better way. Okay. Please reach out. I would love to talk with you. So, but what I want to talk about now is that extreme part. And when, you know, because as emotional eaters and addicted people, we tend to have a black and white personality. We can be addictive, okay, in many ways. And that way can turn into restriction around food. Now, we all know about restriction because we've been on diets. Okay. And I promise you don't ever have to diet again if you're in the Heal Your Hunger universe. Okay. So stop dieting. You don't need to address emotional eating instead. But if you're somebody who's been overweight and then you've lost weight in one way or another, and you love feeling thinner and you love, not being fat, and God knows, having been 50 pounds overweight, I know that being fat is, especially in our culture, a really hard thing. I know that, and I hated it. Okay. So what I want to talk about is when you lose weight, if you've lost weight and you find yourself getting super controlling around food and exercise and possibly dipping into an underweight place. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to focus on the tendency and susceptibility to anorexia after you've been obese or overweight, because it's a thing. I've done it, and I want to warn you against it and explain it. Okay. So what happened to me is, I was 50 pounds overweight. I lost weight. I lived in a thin body for a long time, but there was in a normal, like a thin body that was healthy. I didn't exercise as much back a while back. It wasn't until I was like 45 or so, I thought I better step up my game, and walking. I realized walking wasn't probably going to be enough for me long term. I needed to do some strength type of training, resistance training. And that's where my bar class came in. And I'm so grateful for my bar class because it's gentle. It's not harsh. It's hard, but it's not harsh. Big difference. And I do it, the best kind of exercise is the kind you'll do. So I'm grateful for the exercise that I do. I feel nourished. I feel strong. I love that feeling. And I only started to do that only more recently. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say that I'm kind of all over the place. So forgive me. So anyway, there was a time when, as in a thin body, when I dipped into kind of that mental place of anorexia. I didn't stay there long, but I know it because I was in it, and thank God I didn't stay there. But I want to explain it in case you're susceptible to this. So my dad was dying of cancer. This is 21 years ago. He was dying of cancer, and I felt so powerless. I'd never had somebody close to me die or get sick like this. I was in my early 30s. And what happened was, to cut to the chase, is that I got into that anorexic head and I became underweight. I wasn't really probably anorexic clinically, but I was super thin and I got off on it. Okay. I got off on being super thin. Why? Well, looking back, it's because it was something I could control. And this is often how anorexia happens, right? Is that we live, and I will say too, that many people who end up overweight started as anorexic. And that might be your story. And if that was you, if you've had a bout with anorexia, or you started with anorexia and then perhaps you went to bulimia and then you just stopped the bulimia and just went into emotional eating and overweight or obesity. If you've had anorexia anywhere in your journey, and our relationship with food is a journey, to be sure, it's a lifelong journey. It's a relationship we always have. You can't get rid of it. That's why it's such an important thing to focus on. But if you have anorexia anywhere in your journey, please for sure put it in the comment section. I'd love to hear about it because this is an important conversation. So what I know is that I felt so out of control and powerless when my dad was dying that my body and my food at the time, because I wasn't overeating and I had a sense of control around food. I kind of grabbed a hold of it and used it as something I could control. And I got controlling, and then I got too thin. And I feel sad because my dad was dying and he was sort of like, WTF, like, what's going on with you? I mean, he was too thin, but he had cancer, and he didn't have a lot of appetite from his treatments. So, I'm sorry I caused him concern while he was dying. God knows he didn't need that, and it wasn't like a big alarming thing, but he did talk to me. He's like, what's going on with you? So I'm sorry to him. But at the time, at the time, I didn't know it, like see it exactly at the time, but looking back shortly thereafter, I realized, oh yeah, my dad was dying, and it was like the only thing I felt like I could control. And that's how anorexia often happens, is you have situations in your family, you feel out of control in your family life growing up. There's dysfunction, and you react to that dysfunction, or you cope with that dysfunction through controlling your food. Okay, please put that in the comments if that's you, because many of us have had that experience. But then my experience with emotional eaters, and I've been working with thousands of emotional eaters over the past 34 years, my experience is what starts out, oftentimes we're anorexic in our teen years, which was not my story. My anorexic bout started in the 30s when my dad was dying, but some of you started with anorexia because you had the ability to control early on in your life. And oftentimes it's easier when you're in your teens to be controlling around food. And that's how you cope. But oftentimes it transmutes itself into overeating. And that's where bulimic comes in. It's like, oh no, I've got these massive binges now. I'm not just eating, one Lara bar a day. I'm like all of a sudden having these binges. I'm going to vomit. I'm going to purge. I'm going to, overexercise to purge the calories, or, offset the calorie damage and consumption. So you become bulimic, and then you ruin your teeth and your esophagus, with the acid from bulimia. And then oftentimes you'll stop that, and then you'll just eat, because the eating hasn't been addressed yet. It's just the symptoms of the overeating, trying to deal with it after you do it. So then you just become an overeater, and that's when the weight gain comes, and that's when the obesity comes. So you've been on this journey starting with anorexia, then bulimia, then all out eating and obesity, perhaps. I'm not saying this is your journey necessarily, but if it is, I want to name it because it is something that happens and that I see often with people who struggle with food and weight. Okay. So I want to talk about this because when we have been overweight, we often go back to anorexia, or we enter anorexia, even if we've never been there before. And that was what happened for me. As I lost weight, it was fine for a while. And then I needed some control in my life. And that's when I got into anorexic head. Now, anorexia is definitely a mental illness. It's not really about food and weight. Obviously, it never is. It's really about a coping tool, right? And a mental obsession that helps us cope with life, with stress, with, situations in our life we feel out of control about. But you don't want to be anorexic, because even though the high of being thin is great, it's no way to live, and it's not healthy. Now, I want to talk about that high, because that's often how it happens. When you've been so out of control with food, you've been fat, the high of being thin is a thing, and it's exhilarating. And I've had that, right? Like when you feel, let's just be clear, when you feel out of control of food and you have gained weight and you are living in a large body, one that's larger than you're comfortable with, and you feel out of control and you have wild binges. That was me. I was a binger. It's such a hard thing, and you feel so out of control. And I felt like such a loser. Like in our culture, you are a loser, unfortunately, if you're in a large body. It's a very judgmental culture that is not, we have a lot of fat shaming in our culture. And so it's hard to be in a larger body and be self-loving. So, and not to mention, putting the culture aside, not to mention living out of control, feeling out of control, which I was. No matter what diet I went on, I went right back up the scale. Like I could last like 2 weeks eating healthy. And then I'm like, I need my ice cream and potato chips, Doritos, whatever, crunchy and sweet, right? Salty and sweet. So, so when you do lose weight, there's a sense of exhilaration that comes from that, especially if you reach your goal weight and you're still looking for more. So when I lost about 40 pounds, when I was 21, I lost about 40 pounds, and I was so obsessed with losing weight and how I was filled by that. So I replaced food with not overeating, losing weight, looking good, having people feed my ego with, wow, you look great, you're doing amazing, oh, look at you, you're melting, or, you lost a whole person, blah, blah, blah. All the comments that you get, it feels great. And when we don't feel good about ourselves in the first place, it feeds our ego and we get hooked on that. So I got hooked on the ego feeding instead of the food feeding. It was great. But when I reach goal weight, it's like, people get used to you and they move on, they'd stop commenting, and then you're left feeling empty. This was my story. I felt empty. And like, what's next? Like, what else can I do to fill myself? Because I just focused on weight loss and I didn't have new tools and I didn't fill myself with true sustenance. I just took away the food and lived on the high of losing weight. And I didn't have a foundation. I didn't heal. Okay. I didn't heal that little girl that felt really bad about herself. So I was looking for something else. Now that's at that time I dyed my hair purple. And you might have heard me talk about this in the Secret Sauce group, but I have some purple tips in my hair right now for the first time in 34 years. So I've gone back to purple, but not from the same motive. Okay. So, but at the time I'm like, what else can I do to give me a hit? And dye my hair purple was one of those things. So if you've lost weight and you're kind of like acclimating to a smaller body, but you have all these feelings and you haven't dealt with those feelings, you're going to be looking for hits in another way, another addiction, right? Filling yourself in another way. Oftentimes becoming too thin will become the next addiction, right? So, and if that's the case, you got to watch for that, because being too thin, it won't fill you either. It won't fill you either. Yeah, the anorexic high from being hungry all the time and being able to control that, that feels good. And when you've been fat, it feels really good because you're no longer feeling like a loser and feeling out of control. You're in control and there's a hit from that. But that won't fill you. That will not feed you and it will not fill you. And so I just wanted to bring up this topic as a way of, sharing my cautionary tale, which is food is not what we're hungry for. Ego gratification will not feed us long-term. And we have to find a way to feed ourselves and to be satisfied, soul satisfied, long-term. And that's what I want for you, is to feel soul satisfied, to stop jumping chairs while you're on the deck of the Titanic. Stop jumping chairs, go deeper, deal with that real hunger that you have. Of course, when we have been overweight in our culture, it feels so good to be thin. It feels so good to be thin. And if you've been blessed with weight loss, you're in that place of feeling so much better because, in a culture that values thin, you're feeling more a part of. You're not feeling like a pariah. You're like, wow, I look like other people. Nobody's judging me. Nobody's looking, sideways at me. God, people are so mean, and I experienced it too, the fat shaming. So you're not feeling that anymore. It feels so good. You feel like normal for once, but just beware of that insatiable hunger for more, that insatiable hunger for more ego feeding, for more control, more of a sense of power. It's seductive. It's so seductive. And you can only lose so much weight, right? But your body won't stand for it. I will say, back to health, back to feeding our bodies, in a loving way, back to giving our bodies what we need so they can carry us and operate long-term in a healthy way without breaking down and without sickness. That's an inside out job. That takes self-love. That takes self-care. and no temporary relief that we get from anorexia or from undereating or, fitting in cute clothes. That's all, fitting in cute clothes is great. I love clothes. But, when I had lost a bunch of weight, I could, 3 outfits a day didn't fill me. Buying new clothes didn't fill me. Shopping didn't fill me. I needed to be nourished and fill myself with a real soul food that I needed. And that came from community, that came from real connections with people. And that came from healing my wounds, my habits that were outworn and dysfunctional around my communication with others, my insecurity, I had all kinds of issues. So through my process of healing, I healed those things, and I learned how to nourish myself with God's grace. It's always, any change for me comes from God's loving grace. But the trip to anorexia does not fill us. It does not heal us. And ultimately it'll cause us to break down, our bodies to break down. So I just thought I'd pop in and share about the seductiveness of weight loss, the seduction of weight loss, and how it can really hurt us if we are hooked on it and hooked on the immediate gratification we get from it, in spite of how damaging it can be. So you may be like, girl, I've never lost enough weight to be anorexic. And I get that, because I used to feel that way too. I'm like, boy, if only I could undereat. Those anorexic, I sure envy them, because that's so not my problem. I felt that way too, because I was an overeater. I was a binger. I ate to destruction. I had massive binges, 3,000 calories. But then, 10 or 12 years into my path of healing, I dipped into it because I felt out of control in my life in other ways. And I jumped into that as a way of controlling, finding a sense of control, which doesn't work. It doesn't work. So don't go there. But if you've never even come close to going there, don't wish to be there, because anorexia is a mental illness. And if it grabs a hold of you, it's a mental illness, which means it's got nothing to do with food and weight. That's the symptom of the mental illness of anorexia. But it is fierce for those who have anorexia or have had anorexia, and I am sorry, but how addictive it can be to want that kind of control, to need to restrict in spite of anybody telling you you're too thin. And I've seen it take a hold of other people, of friends. And because it centers in our mind, it's hard to talk somebody out of it, because they're gripped with this fear of gaining weight. And for those who were overweight and lost weight and dipped into anorexia, that's really what's driving us, is a terror of going back up the scale again, because that's our pattern, right? So if you happen to lose weight and then you have this terror of gaining weight again, that's where it can start. That's where the anorexia can start, is I'll do anything to not gain weight again, including, extreme control into an unhealthy relationship with food that includes anorexia and undereating. So beware. There's a better way. There's a way by which you can feel free around food. That's what I want for you, is true freedom around food, where you eat healthy. You're not harsh in any way. You're self-caring and self-loving. I have to watch myself. I mean, I'm in a thin body, I realize now, but I can get a little judgy at times if I feel like I've gained a few pounds. And I have to really, my clients know this, I give my weight to God. I give my weight to God, because when I get in there and start controlling, it never ends well. It usually ends up with me being out of control or feeling like I'm putting on weight instead of losing weight. So I try to be hands off and just do everything I can to be self-caring, to get the connection and community I need to have soul food and feel nourished at the level of which I'm really hungry. We're not hungry for food, friends. We're not hungry for control, even though it feels like we are. We're really hungry for nourishment and a sense of well-being. So I feed myself in every way possible to get a sense of nourishment and well-being, so that I don't have to play tricks with food and with my weight, because it's not a good trip. It's dangerous, it's unhealthy, it's self-abusive, it's secretive, right? It's isolating. I don't want to play those games anymore. So I want to give my weight to God, and I want to get, lock arms with those who are on a healing path, so that we can all encourage each other, help each other out, and heal together. So I want that for you. If you ever want support, please reach out at healyourhunger.com. And I love you so much. I love you so much. Thanks for listening. You're awesome. Please comment on whatever your experiences are on your weight loss journey. Please put it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next show.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.